So, Alex Perez does this big Q&A, and he's asked about the thing with Steve Rogers, okay? And I'm just going to read this to you so you can kind of get a sense of what he said here. The question was, did Steve Rogers really cause the incursions? Alex says, multiple people have caused incursion. Steve just happens to be one of them. Then he's asked, is Chris Evans' last time as Steve Rogers? He says, don't count Cap out just yet. Now, the reason I think that's interesting is because, again, My Time to Shine was trying to get people to think that Steve Rogers caused all the incursions. That's the main problem, and Doom is just going to get him and kill him to stop all the incursions. Okay? And what Alex is suggesting with his comments is Steve is just one of many people that caused incursions. Okay. Now, one reason I think this is interesting is because Daniel RPK kind of talked about this as well. This was last week, maybe the week before. It was in the wake of Shine saying all that crazy shit. And Daniel said, Doom is trying to get every person that caused an incursion. Do you guys remember this? Do you remember when Daniel said this? Doom wants to get every person that caused an incursion, not just Steve Rogers. Okay? And so when Daniel said that, it felt a little to me like he was trying to clarify what Shine was saying. And with Alex now saying this as well, it feels like he is trying to clarify what Shine is saying. And what Alex is implying here is Steve is just one of many people that caused incursions. Now, I want to take this to a really interesting place. Okay. I want to take this to an interesting place. If a person causes an incursion, what does that mean? It means that they are in a time or a place that they are not supposed to be, right? This is the way that it's explained to Doctor Strange. It erodes the stability of space-time, and it could cause an incursion. So if you are in a universe and you're not supposed to be there, you're weakening the boundaries of space-time, you're causing an incursion, right? That's an issue. But isn't it also the case that if you do something you're not supposed to do, you cause a branch timeline? And could then that not then cause an incursion itself? For an incursion to happen, there has to be two universes that are colliding. That's what it is. And that can happen by a regularly occurring universe having something that's not supposed to be there and eroding space-time, right? But think about it like this. The whole reason that the TVA is pruning timelines is to prevent incursions. Don't you realize that? That's the whole idea. So, like, it's explained that the red line causes it so they can no longer be pruned. Well, what does it mean that a universe can no longer be pruned? I would argue that means it now has an anchor being. Okay? So I've been thinking about this a lot, right? Because you have this concept of the anchor beings, which is kind of introduced for Deadpool and Wolverine. There was some talk that would have to do with Doomsday. There's some talk that maybe Doom himself was seeking all of these anchor beings. Now it seems like Doom is seeking all of the beings that caused incursions. Okay, now this next part is crazy speculation. This is definitely speculation, but just walk with me on this. I was thinking back to some stuff that Alex said about how the X-Men in 616 might exist, but they just never got their X gene. So, like, the way He Who Remains did it was he was like, okay, this is the timeline. Here's all the shit that happens in the timeline. I'm going to take the X-Men stuff, meaning these people and them getting the X gene to become the mutants, and I'm going to take that out of the main timeline, and I'm going to put it in this side timeline over here, okay? Now, that means in this timeline over here, everything that's supposed to happen happens. That's important because of eternity, right? But more importantly, this stuff doesn't happen in the main timeline. And so therefore, the X-Men characters like Charles Xavier might just be a regular-ass college professor. Eric Lynchard just becomes some dude, Holocaust survivor guy, right? Okay. So, what is the difference then between the Charles Xavier in 616 and the Charles Xavier in the timeline that was separated out where he has his mutant gene? What I would argue to you is, in the main Prime timeline, the aura or the soul, the temporal aura or the temporal presence, his signature, that guy is Doom. And I would argue that when He Who Remains pulls Victor Von Doom out of the main timeline and puts him into the separate universe, that what he is doing is taking the temporal aura, the actual Doctor Doom, separating him from that timeline and sticking him in a different timeline. What that would mean is that although the character on a different timeline is still technically that character, that the essence or the soul of the original is in that body. Are you following me still? Is this too crazy and esoteric? Do you understand where I'm going with this? Because these are concepts that are actually addressed in Loki. If you remember, one of the first things they ask Loki when he comes to the TVA is, are you a robot or do you have a soul? Do you remember that? They say, can you guarantee that you have, in effect, a essence, a being, or what multiple cultures would refer to as a soul? And then in Loki season 2, Loki is time slipping because his soul or his temporal aura is out of whack. It needs to be disconnected from time and plugged back in. So there's something to, Kang was obviously aware of what this idea was, and that your soul and that your temporal aura exists, and you only have one. Okay, now, if you thought that was crazy, this is where it gets even more crazy, okay? I think it's possible that all of the characters that are able to cause incursions and all the characters that are able to cause branch timelines are actually the essential or prime version of the character. So in Marvel Comics, there is a concept known as Prime Kang. Okay? And Prime just means like the main one. The main one. Right? So if Steve Rogers, because here's where part of this comes from. If Doctor Doom, or rather, if Stephen Strange has a vague memory of the actual original Fantastic Four, because that's something Alex implied. He implied that the reason Stephen remembers the Fantastic Four as a band from the 60s is because he has some echo of the actual memory from the Prime universe. I would argue that means that version of Stephen is Prime Stephen. That's Prime Stephen. And I think Steve Rogers, our Steve, that's Prime Steve Rogers. Okay? Now, here's where shit gets weird. Our Tony Stark is not Prime Tony. But our Victor Von Doom is Prime Doom. This concept is actually how the Russos and all these other people are able to say this is definitive Doctor Doom. This is why there's rumors out there that RDJ will continue to play Doctor Doom after Secret Wars. Do you know why? Because he is Prime Doom. Wouldn't it be really interesting if all of these characters that are causing incursions are not causing incursions because they are jumping through different universes, but they are causing incursions because they have the resonance, the soul, the oral picture of the very first universe? So therefore, as they operate throughout space-time, they are more violent to the erosion of space-time. So they are more of a threat to the balance, because something about having the resonance from the prime version of the universe is potentially what makes them able to create branch timelines. I don't know. It's pretty crazy. It's a pretty crazy idea, man. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty wild. Either way you slice it, though, I think it's good that it's not just Steve Rogers caused the incursions and Doom needs to take them out. Something more to it than that. And in fact, I'll tell you what I think it is. I think it's going to be that Prime Doom will confront Prime Steve Rogers, and he will say something like this: you realized the truth. You figured out the truth. And you chose to preserve this lie. You chose to have a false version of me grow up and live as Tony Stark because he was your friend. You're an asshole, Steve Rogers. And you're selfish. And now I will kill you. You know? Something like that. Something like that would be really cool, really fun. I think that would be a great way to set it up. And either way, I think it's just interesting that Alex is talking about this Steve Rogers thing. And when you couple it with what Daniel said, it really does seem like other scoopers out there are trying to throw cold water on what Shine was saying. Look, maybe Shine was right. Like maybe there's something to what she's saying as well. But I would just argue I think there's something more to it. So what do you guys think of that, man? Prime variants. You think it could be a thing? You think it could be a thing? Hydra Captain would be low-key fire. It would be. I don't expect it in Doomsday, though. I love that theory. I think that something like this could be what it is. And maybe that's all the anchor beings are. Like maybe the anchor beings are prime universe variants that are spread throughout the multiverse to give stability to these new timelines. Yeah, exactly, Steve. Yeah, the prime and the anchors could be the exact same thing. But you would think there would be more universes than there would be prime characters, right? So it can't exactly be that, but there could be something there, yeah. I wonder if Thor will have any more visions like in Age of Ultron. That would be sick, dude. I hope so. I hope so. Thor is so underutilized, I feel. Yeah. Yeah. What if the incursions are the prime universe trying to fix itself? Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, because Sylvie says the multiverse wants to break free. That's why it manifests chaos. Absolutely. I think that's a part of it. It wants to break this and retain what it was. Yeah. What role does Madison play in all of this? Oh, God, I don't know. I mean, she could be front and center, man, you know? Maybe she's the real Iron Man. Maybe we're going to find out that Tony Stark, our Tony, was actually a Victor Von Doom variant. But the real Iron Man was Madison. And then that'd be a real awkward moment between Wong and Tony.